Absolutely.
That's for all the ladies. Women only.
So don't bring a date.
Yeah. And I hope you make it. And our word for today, on this Wednesday, October the 16th, our word for today is insulting. Insulting, our word for today. And here to talk about it is Deacon Dan Brahier. Good morning, Deacon Dan.
Good morning.
Good morning, Ron and Dave. I've got this Simon and Garfunkel kind of vibe going on this morning.
That's it. And you know, that's funny because I'm going to start that talk with an explanation of the history of Hello Darkness, my old friend, which is a fabulous, incredible story of selflessness on behalf of Garfunkel.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Yeah, and selflessness is a good theme for today with the Feast of St. Hedwig.
Mm-hmm.
You know, St. Hedwig, I think, is the living proof of sometimes that actions speak louder than words, because Hedwig never wrote a single word, and yet we've learned so much through her actions. So it's a neat feast day, I think, that way.
Mm-hmm.
The word for today is insulting. And are you guys fans of Blazing Saddles by any chance?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I just have so many good memories of watching that movie over and over when I was a kid. And I'm amazed that the movie is now 50 years old. I mean, celebrating its 50th anniversary. I really don't even want to think about that. But you know, the movie is a classic, I think. It came out in 1974 because it's a satire about life in the Old West. But Mel Brooks spares no groups when it comes to insulting people in the script. So, you know, what makes that movie so classic is that he pokes fun at everybody, every group, every ethnicity. He himself was a practicing Jew, and he pokes fun of the Jews, you know. But that art of teasing other people and giving them, quote, insults has been practiced by everybody from Rodney Dangerfield to Don Rickles. And, you know, on one hand, we can use kind of that whole idea of an insult as a way to poke fun and to laugh, and we take that in good humor. But insults don't always come out that way. Sometimes, while they're for fun and jokes, or other times they're intended to deliberately deride somebody else. And so oftentimes the person becomes offended or insulted by a statement that was actually never intended to be taken negatively, but they take it that way anyway. And so in today's gospel from St. Luke, you know, Jesus begins by saying, "Woe to you, Pharisees." And he's criticizing them for being hypocrites because they like being honored by other people, but they don't look after the needs of the people they're supposed to be helping. And so he's effectively telling them that their strict honoring of the law doesn't mean anything if they're not genuinely showing their love for God by caring for other people. And so in the midst of this conversation, you know, then a scholar comes forward in turn and says to Jesus, you know, I'm not a Pharisee, but I feel insulted by the things you're saying. And Jesus just doubles down on him and says, well, woe also to you as a scholar of the law, you know, for laying difficult rules on people and not reaching out to help them. So, I mean, I think that's an example of somebody taking offense, feeling insulted, not through a deliberate action of Jesus, but because they see themselves in what he is preaching. And so a person might feel the same way when reading that first letter today to the Galatians. St. Paul says that anyone who is immoral, who is impure, who worships idols, who drinks heavily, who acts selfishly, will not inherit the kingdom of God. And so people who read that letter that regularly engage in any of those actions, they're likely to feel like Paul is singling them out, and they're likely to feel insulted, you know? So I remember my mom always saying, the truth hurts. So when somebody says something about us that we find insulting, there is a possibility that we can just take a step back for a minute and think about it, because what they said might actually be true. And so that's what's going on in these readings. Jesus is simply pointing out, here's the problem. When you do this, this is what's going to happen. Paul's saying the same thing. And in effect, if that's what you're doing, then you might feel insulted. But, you know, again, the truth hurts. So we remember today also that when Jesus teaches the Beatitudes in Matthew's Gospel, he says, blessed are you when they insult you and persecute you and utter every kind of evil against you falsely because of me. And he says, your reward will be great in heaven. So Jesus reassures us that if the insults are intentional and their false accusations, we will be blessed and rewarded for our fidelity to Jesus and our faith. So in our world today, people are just so easily upset and so easily offended by the slightest remark that somebody makes. We can't take a good joke anymore, you know, and that's why a movie like Blazing Saddles is so controversial, you know, because you really have to let go and take a joke. Well, today we recognize that an insult can actually serve as a wake-up call to something about ourselves that we need to change. So what Jesus is trying to do with the Pharisees today is to give them the truth, and if they are offended by it, then so be it. It's time to change. So if we're falsely accused for our faith in Jesus, we're assured that we should rejoice and be glad. We'll receive a reward in heaven. And if it's not false and it really is true, it's time for us to clean up our act and take the advice of Paul and Jesus to live our lives differently.
Wow, what a great lesson.
The importance of the examen, right, Deacon Dan? But also in monasteries forever, the whole group would get together and accuse, point out difficulties a person might be having, not to belittle them, but to benefit them, that they might move forward on that kind of thing.
I actually just had a conversation about that with a monk who is living with us in Bowling Green at the university this year, and that whole idea that that's what they do, try to call on one another for improvement.
Good stuff. Thank you, Deacon Dan.